Should be recorded now. So, hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today. I am Mike Osborne, and I am the founder and CEO of Accessible Me. Joining us today, we have um, a, a few people already, some of which are internal. So we have Olivia Gallagher, who may be on screen or maybe in the chat. She supports Accessible Me in our marketing. I'm excited to welcome both Ron and his wife Danielle from our partners at Accessibility Shield over in the United States. Today isn't about doing everything before Global Accessibility Awareness Day. What we're looking to do is not to try and make you be necessarily perfect and do all singing, all dancing, everything by the 21st of May this year. It's not about catching up on years of work in 4 weeks. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is to think about how to use GAAD, Global Accessibility Awareness Day, as a deadline to make one or two meaningful improvements. This should help you create visible progress within your organization and start to build momentum that kind of lasts far beyond the day itself. If accessibility is already on your radar, but you still feel it's a bit unstructured, maybe there's no clear owners, people doing ad hoc things, and this session is for you and should hopefully provide some value. Also, if you're further along on your journey as well, my hope today is that will help you sharpen your focus on what to do next. For those of you who are a few minutes late, don't worry, you haven't missed anything of significance at the moment. The session is being recorded and you will be able to catch up on YouTube, and I'll follow up with the link by email following today's session. So because the issue is not our belief or philosophy at Accessible Me is that for a lot of companies, not all but most, the issue isn't that your organization doesn't care or that your team doesn't care. The real issue is kind of what happens when these good intentions arrive too late. One of the biggest myths we think or we see in this space is that people don't care about accessibility, and in my experience, that's not usually true. More often than not, people are simply not aware in most cases. The problem is late action. We are under tight deadlines. Our sales team are busy trying to get the sell in, and maybe they haven't been briefed or simply aren't thinking about accessibility. So they drop the price. They take on what they think is a good deal, and suddenly the developer team are pushing back, and they go, okay, well we're already squeezed on time. Something's got to give, and unfortunately, all too often we're seeing accessibility being one of the things that gets cut. Other things can be unclear ownership. So often we see accessibility is someone else's job. Someone else will take care of this, and that leads to things like scattered responsibility. There are bits that are my job, there are bits that are not. And accessibility is often treated as a campaign rather than being an operating habit. A couple of examples. If I fast forward just under a month now, 21st of May for Global Accessibility Awareness Day, look out for the organizations that simply do a logo change, maybe a social media post. But what happens outside of the days, the other kind of 360 plus days of the year? Same with other events like Black History Month, Neurodiversity Week, all of these things, you might see a logo change. Maybe if the rainbow appears, with the some organizations may still be late and using the puzzle piece rather than the updated infinity loop. All of these things just show, even with good intentions, that but there's still some catching up to do. Emmy, welcome to the session. I'm just going to mute you just because there is some background noise. So if anybody does want to speak at any stage, please do use the raise hand feature in Teams, and I will of course give you an opportunity to speak. So just to help me pitch this at the right level for everyone on the session, if you could pop in the chat which of the following best describes where your organization is right now, that help us pitch to the right level today. So number one could be you're just getting started. So It might be you have some awareness of accessibility. That could be you personally or your team. A two would be you're doing some activity, but it's not structured right now. And a number three would be you're already doing some work and you're looking to build momentum. Just going to pause for a moment and scroll into the chat. So I can see some twos, so activity but not structured. That seems to be the core here for what's coming in. Hi, Rachel from the IPO, level 3, which is fantastic. So already doing some work, but looking to build momentum. Whether you are yet to take your first step on the accessibility ladder or you're at the top, hopefully, one of the goals we seek to do in these type of sessions are to get you at least one rung or a couple of rungs up from where you currently are. So there's no pressure as well for anything in this session. If you'd rather not share publicly, if you're using a pen and paper to take notes or your favorite note-taking app, please feel free to answer it for yourself. I want this to be a psychologically safe session. So if you prefer not to post anything in public, that's absolutely fine. Same goes for cameras. If you want to turn your camera on to say hello, you're always welcome and nice to see smiling faces. But no obligation, and that could be for a variety of reasons. It might be you're simply having a bad day and don't have any makeup on. It could be a busy household or a busy office. So wherever you are on the spectrum for this journey, what matters at the moment is it matters now for more than one reason. And we'll talk more on that in just a moment. Camera's not working, but not smiling. So the fact I've made you smile is always a nice thing, and hopefully that's not just my accent, my Bristolian twang. So what we tend to see is the biggest mistake is simple. Organizations that treat Global Accessibility Awareness Day as a communications moment rather than an action deadline. So they plan a post. They sometimes even plan a campaign. So you might see they get started a couple of days, maybe even a couple of weeks before, and maybe they might mention it internally. So oh, there's this event coming up, Global Accessibility Awareness Day. The likelihood is there's going to be someone in your ERG, the Employee Resource Group, but they don't use the data to actually complete a practical piece of work. So there might be something that gets started but not finished. There might be intent to post something, but does that actually happen? And if it does happen, do the social media posts have alternative text? If you're doing a video, does it have an accurate transcript and closed captions? All of these things matters because a post itself isn't a strategy, and a simple logo change, whether that's kind of a rainbow logo, your logo on a different background, that's not progress either. So awareness without action can actually damage trust. We live in an age where social media is all the more important. We have influencers more than ever, and if people have the negative experience, they're not just keeping it to themselves anymore. They're going on the TripAdvisors, they're going on Trustpilot, and they're even going on kind of their Instagram and Facebook and talking about your brand. So all of these things, good intent without action can damage your trust, especially if these people with disabilities. They might be your colleagues, customers, or even service units who can't actually see what's improved. I want to take a moment there just to flag something we also see in quite a few of our audits. Sometimes I do genuinely see meaningful change, and it's fantastic stuff, and it's things that they should be celebrating. And then I go on the website, I go on socials, and I can't find anything to say, what it is your organization's actually done. So if you think your team, your organization have done something particularly worth sharing this year, talk about it on social media. If people have been burned by a negative past experience, let them know you've actually heard them. You've seen their feedback, so the feedback actually isn't just going in a database somewhere doing nothing, but that you're actually doing something about it. And this is where I want to be careful. I'm not anti-awareness as an organization. Awareness matters, and sometimes we have been previously criticized for focusing a little too much on awareness, and without people knowing, and in many cases, when people come to us for accessibility advice, it's often because they have a disability, they have a medical condition, or they know somebody that does. Quite often, a lot of the ignorance comes where people are in these social bubbles where there aren't people with disabilities in that mix. So awareness matters absolutely, but it should be attached to motion. Because awareness without action, and actually moving things forward isn't moving the needle. And I always say, I don't mind who is raising the bar for accessibility. I just want that bar raised. So if that's the mistake, you're probably thinking, well, what should we do instead? And this is the simplest version I know. If you take nothing else from today, this is the 30-day Global Accessibility Awareness Day sprint. So you can do one or more of these, and it's going to make a difference. Make sure accessibility has an owner, at least one owner in the team. As a caveat or as a disclaimer to that, what I would say is accessibility shouldn't rest on the shoulders of one individual. Imagine sending one person from your team on accessibility training, and they come back highly motivated, and then the law changes. We've got ADA, the Americans with Disability Act Title II in the States. We've recently had the European Accessibility Act here in the UK. And suddenly, this knowledge, this experience is attractive to a business. So this person leaves to a better paid role, or somebody who's going to take it a bit more seriously. If all that knowledge sits with one person, that's a risk. But somebody should own it. That's an important thing I would say. Try and think about one priority journey. So if you look at your consumer journey end to end, if you are a restaurant and you want to increase customers, you might be doing things like social media ads, Google ads. Are those accessible to people with disabilities? Is your menu? If, for example, people want to get in touch with you and your organization and the phone number is a required field, there's a good chance you might actually be actively and not maybe not intentionally discrimination against people with hearing conditions, people who may struggle with hearing and prefer a video call, where they can lip read or have closed captions on. Try and get one review in the diary, whether that's a piece of e-learning, whether that's a web page or a couple of pages on your website. Try and think about a visible improvement. If somebody has complained about something within your product suite or your services, maybe on Google, Trustpilot, TripAdvisor, any of those, take that as something you can fix, and then speak about it. So, hey, I respond to the comment as well. Hey, thank you so much for sharing that feedback. I'm sorry you had a negative experience with us. We take your feedback seriously, and we have committed to making the change. Even if you haven't fixed it yet by Global Accessibility Awareness Day, you can say we are committed to make a change. With our team are on it within the next couple of months. Better still, if you can attach an actual date that when it be fixed, you can invite them to come back and maybe they'll even kind of update their review. Do one public commitment, so you've made the visible improvement. Talk about it. You've got a 2 for 1 there, and have one next checkpoint. So, say for example, you do an accessibility audit with us at Accessible Me or our partners with Accessibility Shield. You can use that and say, okay, here's the state of play right now. You get an accessibility certificate that kind of says, hey, you're actually doing quite good on your website. There are a couple of areas, and here are the partial submit points. If you can then say, our developers are on this, and if you check back within a month's time, 2 months' time, and these things will be fixed, that date gives people a checkpoint to know when to come back. And that checkpoint doesn't have to be Global Accessibility Awareness Day this year, it could be next year. And all of these things are enough to make movement without creating paralysis. So to quickly unpack it, one owner means somebody is accountable, not 10 people vaguely involved. Just think of the kind of the RACI model there, the responsible, accountable, and whichever the other two are. I can't think of it off the top of my head, I blanked. One priority journey means picking one experience that matters, not everything. So many times I see people try and do too much at once. Fix one problem. One review means taking a look at that real journey. Where are the barriers at the moment? What is unclear and what breaks? One visible improvement means kind of something must actually change. It's no good saying it's going to change, and then nothing happens. It's kind of something you can demonstrate, something you can proudly show. A public commitment means people should be able to see what you've done and what's coming next. So we're celebrating what's come behind, and we're looking ahead, to being an even more inclusive, even more accessible company. And that one next checkpoint, that's not something that dies the day after a GAAD. If that's not happening, if it was happening on May 21st, but not on May 22nd, that's not a meaningful change. Let's be real. So the second step in the model is where a lot of people get stuck because they try and tackle too much at once. One of the weakest assumptions I see is this: we need a fully accessible program before we can say anything publicly. And that might sound kind of responsible. I would encourage all organizations to be thinking about accessibility as early as they can in the process. And I can almost guarantee you that if it goes from design to development, your costs have probably gone up by five times as much. And if it's gone from development to release, probably another 5 times again. So if you can think about it at that initial design, even the brainstorm stage, you're already going to be quite far ahead. So whilst you think about, you need something finished, sounds reasonable, it often just creates delay. You don't need to fix everything before you start, but what you do need is to choose one journey that matters to you, to your organization, and improve it. One of the reasons I say it doesn't necessarily need to be everything is, imagine I am running the world's most inclusive hotel for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. All of my teams can sign not just British Sign Language BSL, maybe they can sign in multiple languages. So if you've got our American guests, they can sign ASL. Haven't gone to the nth degree to do things like helping people with speech impediments or other conditions might be a great effort and make you more inclusive, yes, but it doesn't necessarily contribute to the experience of our deaf visitors who are coming to the hotel for the specific reasons. And that's where I encourage companies not just to, when they do these automated checks, to have an overall, hey, here's our accessibility score, but how are you scoring in different categories? How well are you doing for blind inclusion, for people who are partially sighted? How well are you doing for inclusion of people who are deaf and hard of hearing? For neurodivergent individuals such as myself, I have Tourette's, ADHD, autism, depression, anxiety, a whole host of things. How are you doing for people with mobility conditions or arthritis? As we get older, the government keeps on increasing the retirement age. And as we get older, we are more likely to have impact on our sight, on our hearing, and our mobility. So even if you don't think even if you don't have a condition right now, we can design for our own futures, and this all matters. So think about what journey that matters. This might be your job application process. Do you have a upload your CV functionality on your website? And if you do, does it actually pull those features? Or are you then asking people to kind of copy and paste all those things into your different boxes? Oh, and by the way, it's timed out, but we didn't tell you. There's a timeout. All of these frustrating things in the job flow. It could be your donation flow if you're a charity. You want to make it as easy as possible. Your event sign up. It could be today's webinars like this for Accessible Me. It could be other events. You might be doing an event to, like Mike and Hospice do their walks. So all of these things. It could be a learning module, and on the learning modules where people often say to me, Mike, we've got 1,000 modules. Where should we get started? Try and look at, okay, which ones are mandatory? Which ones do people have to do, especially if they are recurring? Do you have to do these modules every year? There's a good chance that you're going to get the broadest reach there. If you need to prioritize them, Now, if they're an annual thing, they've only just happened, there's a good chance that you can put that on the pipeline. You should look at the courses that are coming up soonest and get them fixed. It could be a service request form. Quite often I hear a lot of organizations say, nobody's ever complained about accessibility of our products or our services. And I look at their evaluation form or their feedback form, and they either aren't asking the questions, did you have an accessible experience, or the form itself isn't accessible. So making sure that is. You can have PDF templates that people use every day, or your accessibility statement page. If that's outdated or hard to use, try and tidy up there. The key ultimately is to pick something real that matters to you and your organization, is to pick something that's used. So there's no good in just picking those low hanging fruit if nobody actually uses that page. Maybe go on your Google Ads and see what is your most landed on web page, and start there. Make sure that web page, especially your homepage, is one that's accessible, and try and pick something that you personally can influence and is worth improving. But sometimes I tend to use a couple of analogies, and I sometimes say accessibility to some business owners can be like a Trojan horse. This massive beast. They go on the web content accessibility guidelines website, they see all of the different criteria, and they are overwhelmed. And then legislation kicks in, so the Trojan horse is heading towards the building. If accessibility matters to you but not your organization, one of the things I think we can do is to be Trojan mice. We can all make the bits we're working on. If you work in a shop, you can maybe learn a bit of sign language. Even the basics can make a big difference to say thank you to some of your colleagues. It could be you've got some neurodiverse colleagues in your workspace, and you look at the cutlery, or you consider not having strong smelling coffees or tuna salads and stuff like that in the office. You can do one bit that's meaningful, and you're going to increase inclusion for many. And if you're not sure, there are lots and lots of charities who do different things with different areas of different disabilities. Maybe even volunteer for them. Maybe like as Dave from the Accessibility Shield said recently, maybe volunteering to support the dog shelter, or taking the dogs on the walk. These things can make a big difference, and if you can't get out, consider donating if indeed you're able to do so. At this stage, if you already know the journey you choose, please feel free to write it down now. You're welcome to use the chat to do that, but as I say, there are no expectations. If you're writing on a piece of paper, your favorite note taking out, that's absolutely fine as well. Moving on then, next we'll be speaking around kind of what this looks like. What this looks like, and what this looks like will vary a bit by sector, so I'll try and make this more concrete. And keep an eye on chat. I'm not seeing anybody writing in there, and that's absolutely fine. But what I would say, if you have any questions at any stage of this webinar, please do use that raise hand feature, and you can come off mute to speak, or you can write your questions in the chat. We have Olivia from the Accessibility team who will capture some of these meetings, and we can absolutely come back to them at the end. So, what good looks like? What good looks like is kind of not identical in every organization. If you're a council or public body, a strong starting point is usually kind of a high resident journey and a kind of standard document type. That might be something like a standard PDF. You can then publish a short update on what you've changed and a kind of a concrete route for people to actually report the barriers. So if you encountered challenges today, here is an email address that is monitored. Here is a telephone number, or here's an alternate way that you can get in touch and let us know. If you're from a charity, a strong starting point is often the donation journey. So looking at the supporter sign up, your campaign assets, access information for the events, you want to make that as easy as possible, and not just as easy as possible, as accessible as possible. The web content accessibility guidelines themselves actually exist because somebody tried to book onto somebody with disabilities tried to book their tickets for the Olympics and had a terrible experience. That journey wasn't considered, and we've had the ripple effect across the different industries. The key is to connect accessibility to kind of the mission, not just the presentation. And for businesses, especially larger ones, the best starting point is to kind of pick one employee experience, so something internal, and one customer touch point. And by one employee experience, I'm not talking about the kind of tokenistic diversity hire, but think about the application process, for example. Are you posting on accessible or disability friendly job boards? Are you sharing the questions in advance to be more inclusive for people who are neurodivergent? And are there people who kind of look like me on the interviewing team? And by look like me, that might be race and religion. It could be a limb difference, skin difference, like vitiligo. Because if I am an individual and I'm going on your website, whether that's I'm a potential applicant to join your team or a customer, if there's nobody that looks like me, if all the imagery is basically white men between the ages of 18 and 30, and there's no one with silver hair, no one with a skin condition or a wheelchair user, or somebody with a limb difference, so am I going to feel that I belong? Do consider intersectionality as well. People can have more than one of the kind of UK protected characteristics. So sexual orientation, gender, age. Or there's nothing to say this isn't a kind of an elderly black woman who is blind and has partial vision using a wheelchair. These things aren't siloed, and we need to consider those kind of edge cases to make it as inclusive as we can for everyone. So I've noted for your business, that could be the onboarding, it could be recruitment, internal learning, or a high traffic digital journey. The key ultimately isn't to get lost in to copy another sector. So it's to kind of pick the best version that matters for you and matters for your business in your context. Once organizations do make progress, the next question we often hear is, how do we talk about that, through what we're doing without kind of sounding self-congratulatory? I can't even say it now. Self-congratulatory, and this is where a lot of organisations get a bit nervous because they don't want to sound performative, and kind of, in all honesty, that's a fair concern. So the simplest answer is this: talk about progress, not perfection. I am getting increasingly fed up with the organisations who go, we are completely 100% accessible, because we are an accessibility company and we're not there yet. They might say, oh, we have a BSL speaker at our events. If you have an international audience, do you have an American Sign Language interpreter, or do you have French Sign Language? Because sign language isn't a universal thing. So there's always something we could do to increase representation. So this notion of progress over perfection is, just be honest, we're all on a journey. Quite often when I work with C-suite, the founders, the CEOs, the COOs, they often say to me, Mike, I don't take action. And it's not because I'm not well intended, it's because if I get it wrong, it becomes newsworthy. The newspapers or some social media outlet will go, the CEO of this company has used ableist language or gendered language. So instead they do nothing. Whereas if we accept, hey, I'm learning, I'm on a journey, our organization is still catching up, but just this month alone, we have audited around 80% of our website, and we're committed to doing the next 20% over the next coming weeks and months. A strong Global Accessibility Awareness Day post says what we've reviewed. It says what we have changed. It will state who we've helped, so who we've designed this for, what still needs work, so not claiming perfection, but if you can say we've paid attention to the web content accessibility criteria 2.1. We know 2.2 is the standard at the moment. That WCAG 3.0 is coming, and there are also other guidelines like COBA, the Cognitive Accessibility Guidelines, that we're not yet compliant with, but we intend to get there. Acknowledging what needs work actually builds trust, and also let somebody know how they can access, they can report a barrier or access the report. That tone alone is going to build more trust than a kind of a polished celebration that tells people nothing. Hey, we're a inclusive employer. What does that really mean in practice? Does it mean you kind of employ people with disabilities and give them meaningful roles and the same career progression as everyone else, or simply that you've got somebody in your team who might be colorblind, or have a different condition? I've got a question then for everyone on this post, or join us for the chat today. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can use the comments as well. If a sample post or a carousel template feels like something that'd be useful to you after the session, please pop a yes in the chat, and it is absolutely something we can follow up with. Another thing, if you are posting about accessibility today, over the next few days, or for Global Accessibility Awareness Day itself, the content itself also needs to be accessible. Rachel, thank you for the yes please in the chat. We can absolutely get that template over to you, and in fact we'll probably do it as a standard thing to everyone who has registered for today's session and joined us as a thank you. Joanna, also, I can see, yes, so we will get something over to you shortly. So, moving on then to what to actually make accessible in your global accessibility content. Kaylee, can you have the template for your socials? Of course you can, and yeah, this is something we can actually work on and get over to you. So this actually is a slide that could be a whole session in its own, and I've actually spoken on some of these in advance. So if you're just getting started with accessibility and you're very new to the journey, if you go on to YouTube and search our Inclusive Insights sessions, we've got sessions on those introduction to accessibility sessions, which will bring you up to speed to this. So I'm going to keep this as practical as possible, related to the kind of post itself. If you're creating GAAD content, make sure the content itself is accessible. Add alt text to the images. There's a whole alt text is basically alternative text. If somebody can't physically see the image itself, then it's a way of describing the image. And when you're describing the image, try to convey what the image is. It's just trying to show you. So if, for example, I think about if you're trying to find that image on Google, your image that you post on social media, and you want it to show in the Google image results. How would you find the difference between, if I said to you, go and find an orange tree, you might go away and find a tree that has orange fruits on. And I might have said, actually, no, I'm looking for a tree that's the color orange. Think about how specific you need to be, because that kind of specificness, a close up of a headshot, a full body shot, somebody smiling, try and think about what the message is you're trying to get across and write to that. Keep it short if you can, and especially for busier images like an infographic or something else, try and make sure there's a text alternative entirely, not just alt text. If we're using carousels, try and make sure the text is readable. So check your contrast, make sure your font sizes are sensible. If you have videos, one thing you might consider with your social posts is to create a video of yourself saying exactly all the things you have said in writing, but now people have an option of how they consume it. They can read the post, they can watch the video, they can, if you've got captions, they can turn them on, they can lip read if they prefer to do that, so all this can make a big difference. Make sure you're not relying on color alone to carry meaning. So not saying, click on the red button to download your report, but just say, tap the download button to download today's deck. By giving a very descriptive link description, it's very clear on where to find it. If I'm using a screen reader, I'm not using the words click here or learn more. I'm being descriptive, or download the deck. So that's an example of making your links clear. And if you are inviting people to an event, include the access information clearly on your page. If you are providing a sign language interpreter, let them know. If you are providing closed captions, let them know. You could do an anonymous survey, for example, where you can actually ask people to volunteer their information, like if they have a disability need. No need to actually use the details for that one. You can, just by saying, I'm hosting this event, do you have a disability need? Give some options and allow people to submit it. That gives you an insight to your audience without even having to kind of know who this is, that's disclosing it. And that anonymity can go a long way. A surprising amount of awareness content about accessibility actually creates a barrier of its own, and that's a kind of an avoidable own goal. So please don't be doing these. Here are 10 tips for accessibility, like you post across your social media, maybe like your Instagram, your LinkedIn, and then use those special fonts you sometimes see, the bolded fonts, the italics, because ironically, those fonts aren't accessible to a screen reader. So there's no point doing top 10 tips on accessibility and that not be accessible in its own right. So then, if the actions are this practical, why do so many teams still get stuck? Most teams aren't getting stuck because accessibility is impossible. They're getting stuck because, this might feel familiar to the start of the session, they're getting stuck because, number one, nobody owns it. There's nobody, it's always somebody else's problem. I'm just the graphic designer. So I'm not the one posting it, so I don't need to worry about the alt text. It might be the graphic designer using that as a copy. Well, these are the brand guidelines. I know the contrast isn't most accessible, but my hands are tied. You might actually look at the brand guidelines and go, well, here are the approved colors, and this color combination is something that's approved and more accessible. I will use that. So make sure there is an owner, and if there is no owner, consider it you, volunteer. That could be your Global Accessibility Awareness Day action. Number two, the scope is too big, so trying to bite off more than you can chew, and actually progress over perfection. If you, rather than say, I'm going to have a fully accessible website, if you can commit to having at least, 5 pages on your website fully accessible this month, you're going to commit to doing another 5 next month, and before you know it, your 20-page website is fixed within 4 months because you paid special attention there. Number three is because the buy-in is weak, so there's no internal buy-in. You're relying too heavily on ERGs, the employee resource groups. You're not actually communicating what is being done. Number four will be that the priorities are unclear. So maybe you've done an accessibility audit and there are loads of fixes, but you're not sure where to start. You could look at, okay, well, here's the low-hanging fruit. I could do these quickly. Or you might look at this and go, these are the criticals. These are the things that if we actually tackled the biggest barriers first, and we can celebrate those. And if any of these feel familiar, the answer at this stage isn't more awareness. The answer is clearer structure. And that's an important shift, because once you and your organization can see the blocker clearly, the next move becomes a lot easier. Any questions at this stage before I move on? I'm just looking for the raised hands. There's none at the moment. I think we're all on the same page. So let me give you now the internal language that's going to help you move this forward. If you want to move this internally, the message needs to fit your audience. So if you're speaking to leadership, especially if leadership isn't necessarily knowingly consistent of people with disabilities. Now, statistically speaking, they are like if 10% out of the population have dyslexia, or 1 in 12 men and 1 in 200 women have color blindness, and you've got 10 execs, there's a likelihood that somebody in your business has some kind of disability need. But speaking to the right stakeholders, aligning to the KPIs, and these things can make a big difference. So for leadership, talk about reducing risk and rework. So yes, there with accessibility comes a natural compliance element, but so risk, the one risk might be, um, yes, I know the age of Title II kind of deadlines has been pushed a little bit, but that's not to say the urgency isn't there. So the risk is still very much there. And if you sit and do nothing until January, February next year, I can guarantee you most of the people who are able to fix that are going to put up their prices and it's going to cost you a lot more. So be fixing now if there's something that you haven't done already. It's also going to introduce rework. If you're in HR and learning development, then think about the employee experience and learning access. By making your content accessible and by having representation in your imagery and everything else, people are more likely to be loyal to a company and they're more likely to stay. That means you don't have to spend thousands of pounds filling the jobs of the people you've lost. You're going to have a better Glassdoor rating or kind of employee satisfaction board, which in turn means more people are going to join your company. If you're in comms and marketing, you need to be talking about trust and reach. So if you talk about the purple pound, for example, here in the UK, I'm not sure if the US has a purple dollar, but the purple pound is effectively a metaphor for the spending power of the disability community. You know, regardless of where you're from, it is significant. We're talking millions, if not billions. And if you're in digital and product teams, talk about usability, clarity, and completion. This all matters because accessibility often kind of stalls when it gets framed as somebody else's agenda, as I've noted a few times now. If you connect it to the outcomes each team already cares about, the conversation changes. So if HR have the KPI of reducing staff turnover, of increasing customer employee satisfaction, accessibility can go a long way. And once you know the blocker and the internal frame, the next question then becomes kind of what kind of help do you need? And by you, I am talking to you, kind of the lovely people who have given up an hour of your time to join us on today's webinar. So in this slide is where I want to help you make that decision and not just leave with more ideas. So if what you need most is awareness and alignment across your team, training is quite often the right place to start. That might be empathy-led training, so or something else. It might be you know what you need to do, but you don't know how to do it. Alt text is a big one that commonly comes up. You know, my team know they need to do alternative text on the image, but they've got no idea what good alt text actually looks like. There's plenty out there, and we have training on it as well. If what you need is evidence or prioritization and a clearer view of where the biggest barriers are, an audit is normally the better route. Accessibility Shield, I know some of you are on the call. If you did want to pop a link into kind of the Armour platform, just as an example of the type of thing we can do. Don't worry if you're unable to at the moment. We can share some links out after. But an audit is normally a good place to start because with that, especially with the Armour platform as a great example, no longer are we just doing Excel reports, which are technically redundant. Your development team have just gone away and fixed one thing. This platform is live. So if you're going away and making changes, you can see your score improving. You know, once that's done, and it gives you a reason to keep on doing that. Also, if you've gone and fixed the specific thing that was flagged and introduced other areas, this will get logged as well. So, you know, an audit is a fantastic route to go down if you need that evidence prioritization and internal buy-in from senior leaders. If what you need is empathy, shared understanding, and internal buy-in, allyship, which is our accessibility-themed escape room, can be a very powerful starting point because that helps teams experience the barriers rather than just hearing about them. And when I say experience the barriers, I'm not saying they will simulate disability, because that's not necessarily true. Even if you put our gloves on, which simulate arthritis, or one of our 10 pairs of glasses, which simulate different visual conditions from double vision, tunnel vision, blurred vision, or cataracts. You have the luxury of being able to take those off. Somebody who lives with these conditions day to day doesn't. But what it does do is it gives you an empathy of what the barriers can be like. We can look at your website, your e-learning through this lens, and then you can go, okay, I had no idea that I was putting barriers to people who are colorblind, to people who are deaf and hard of hearing. And once teams experience it for themselves, they are much, much more likely to go away and engage with your EDI training, your equity, diversity, and inclusion training than without it. And if what you need is strategic clarity with a decision maker or a senior sponsor, often one-to-one or one-to-group sessions are often a quick way forward. And there are a number of organizations that offer that in addition to us. So all four of these can sit within the same starting offer, depending on what would help you most. What I would say then is if today has helped you see what needs to happen, but you also know that your team needs a little bit of support to make it real, this is the simplest place to start. So our Kickstart Your Accessibility Journey gives you 4 routes in, depending on what would be most useful. That training, the audit, allyship, or the strategy session. And the point isn't really to force anybody down the same path, is to help meet you where you are and help you start in the right place. So I know some of you will leave today knowing you need help, but you don't know what route's best. And if that is the case, then we have opened a limited number of follow-up clarity calls for the attendees after the session. So you will, of course, send that link out. All of these are here to help you choose your right step, not to pressure you into something bigger. So whilst we do offer kind of packages and everything else, we don't tie you into anything. If you take just one of these sessions, it's about proving kind of fixing an immediate problem you have and proving value to your team. If you can go away and show your boss, hey, I've made our website more inclusive or more accessible to people with disabilities, you don't need to jump into the next thing. Track your Google Analytics and track the spend on your website if it's commercial. See if that's going up, if people are more getting to the checkout, if people are spending more money. Because Google's crawlers, they are essentially deaf-blind bots. They can't see your content and they can't hear it. So if you aren't doing alt text, if you don't have transcripts on your videos, those things might as well not be there as far as the bots are concerned. So not only is an accessible website a great thing to do, it increases your search engine optimization. You will actually rank higher on Google, and in the age of GPT, you'll be more likely to be picked up by the generative AI bots as well as being an authority in this space. So whether you do this with us with us at Accessible Me, or whether you do this internally first, what I do want you to do is to leave the day with one clear commitment. So think about this then, and kind of closing this part of the session with that commitment. Before Global Accessibility Awareness Day, before 21st of May 2026, what will you do? Are you going to go away and appoint an owner? Are you going to review one journey? 3, are you going to fix one barrier? 4, are you going to kind of publish one progress update? Or number 5, are you going to train one team, be that your developers, be that HR, be that your web developers, And if you are comfortable, please put your choice in chat. And if you're not comfortable, if you need to discuss that internally first, that's also fine. Note it on a piece of paper. Maybe even send yourself an email or a sticky note on your screen. The reason I ask is simple. Clarity creates momentum. So once you know what you need to do, once you've decided on that step, you can take that step to get forward. A quick trick, if you're not sure and if it's between one or the other, flick a coin, because if it lands on the thing and you go, that's not the right answer, you know that you actually know then the decision you wanted to make all along. And a public commitment, even if it in a small way, makes the follow through more likely. So if you are willing to pop in the chat, I am going to appoint one owner, and that is my action. That's a good commitment piece. And if you can then message someone in your team, your manager, or one of your colleagues, they can keep you accountable before now as well. And even if you don't want that peer pressure, set a reminder, pop it in your calendar on Monday next week, on Monday the week after, and Monday the week after that to do something. 3 checkpoints between now and Global Accessibility Awareness Day to go, have I done what I committed to do today? At this stage, I would normally read a few responses in the chat if they come in. There are none, and that's fine. So let me close with the clearest possible next step. Essentially, you have 3 practical next steps between now and then. The first is you can take the 30-day Global Accessibility Awareness Sprint and run that internally. I will be sharing the deck after this session, so if you can't remember what that was or you haven't written it all down, absolutely fine. You have that as a frame of reference. You can use the follow-up checklist, which we mentioned in the chat. So Rachel, Joanna, and Kaylee, you'll all be receiving this, and you can use that along with the templates for today. And if you want help working out the right next step for your organization, feel free to book that clarity call with us at Accessible Me. With that, I do want to say thank you for being here, and thank you for taking accessibility serious enough to act on it. And with that, we've got around 6 minutes left on the call. I don't have a hard stop, so if you want to stick around, please do so. And I'm going to open the floor to questions. And if it helps, please feel free to ask ask either about it for your organization specifically, about kind of which of the first steps would make much more sense in your context. So yeah, with that, I think we've got time probably for a maximum of 5 questions, most likely. But yeah, however that looks, we can stop there and we can hear from you. Rachel, thank you so much for the feedback. I'm really glad it's been a helpful session. Yeah, many people have 1 o'clock calls, so that's absolutely fine. Thank you so much for joining, and we hope to see you on future sessions. You're welcome, Kaylee, and thank you for joining. I hope you find this useful, and if you do have any questions, thanks, Sarah. I appreciate you joining as well. All the best, and we look forward to staying in touch. Again, Joanna, you're welcome. I'm delighted to hear that has been helpful for you. Emmy and Joe. You're welcome as well, Joe. I appreciate you joining and giving up your hour to spend with us. I will keep the recording running just in case, Emmy, your question or your note is a question and not a thank you. But with that, do look out for the YouTube recording. Emmy, again, piece of feedback, great session. Thank you. Very much appreciated to everyone who has given up your time. So with that, I can stop the recording at this stage, just to give those of you who are still here the psychological safety to answer your question without it being captured.